Now, here are some consonants. And these four are very, very easy because they look like just what they are. This looks like the B sound. This looks like a D. This looks like a K. This looks like a T. And so they are. There were probably slightly different pronunciations. Maybe this was B. Maybe it was something between a B and a V, like B. This may have been a downright duh, or it may have been something more like the, where the tongue is hitting the teeth. Those are subtleties we needn't worry about. At any rate, it's basically B, D, K, T. And the names are beta, delta, kappa, tau. So, those four won't require much work of you. Here are five that will require some work. This one is the S, as you can see in this form. This one, I guess you can see it too if you imagine that that is a cursive S. It looks quite a bit like a cursive S if you make a fat one. So, this sound is S. You may wonder why there are two different forms of the letter, and the answer is that for this particular letter, sigma, if the sound occurs as the final sound of a word, the convention, the tradition is to write it in this form, the one that looks like our printed S. Anywhere else in the word, the convention is to write it this way. So, this symbol, the one that looks like our printed S, occurs only as the last letter of a word. Okay, sigma, you can deal with that. Lambda, their L. I think that if you look at it a little bit, you can see that if this were a cursive L and had a bit of a loop up like this, it'd look a lot like our L. It's not all that different than our cursive L. Here's a gamma, a G sound. This tail goes below the line. And if you were to imagine finishing the top off with closing that circle, it might look a bit like a cursive G in our language. At any rate, that's the symbol for G. This one, you know already, though you associate it with geometry rather than with writing, probably. This is what you learned as pi. We pronounce the Greek letter is called P, and it's pronounced P. So when you see this in Greek, instead of thinking 3.1416 and so on, you think P. When you see this one, think You may have seen this as a representation for microns somewhere along the way. At any rate, this is the letter mu, and it's an sound. So there's a little bit of work you'll need to do on these letters, but probably not a whole lot. Here are 4 Greek consonants that will cause you some grief because they look like what they're not. This looks like a V. Greek doesn't have a V sound. This looks like a P. If you think about it, we already used 3.1416 to represent the sound P. This looks like an X, a X sound, but it isn't. And this one looks like an F, but it isn't. So, these will cause some trouble. Let's look at them. This symbol, instead of encoding a V sound, encodes a N sound. It is their N. If you think about it, remember the letter that we use, the symbol we use to encode the sound N, they used for eta. It says A. This one is therefore what they use to say N. You're going to have to practice at that. This one, they've already got P covered, remember, is what they use to encode the sound This is their roll. This thing that looks like an X is really a sound like KH. It's a k sound that lets some air out afterwards. So it's something like k, k, k. It is this letter, when it occurs in Greek words that are then imported into English as English words, gets represented as a CH. You'll know it in Christmas, and psyche, psychology, and chorus. All the CHs that aren't ch, but instead are k in English, they come from this. He, h. You can pronounce it a hard K if you want to, but it really isn't. It's much more like a K with air let out around it. And this thing that looks like an F is a letter that doesn't occur in every dialect of Greek. It's not pronounced enough in some dialects even to make its way into their local alphabets. But in some dialects it was used, and it's very helpful in understanding some forms, and it did occur in some Greek alphabets. So we want to make use of it in Greek before Christmas. This letter is called digamma, and it's the w sound. Now the thing about the w sound is that sometimes it's a consonant and sometimes it's a vowel. It's a consonant in a word like wine, but if you put it after a vowel, think of our words throw and threw, as in throw a ball, or he threw a ball. O-W and E-W. That W gets lost in the vowel. Throw, through, and it becomes a diphthong. And the same thing happened in Greek. When the W combined with a preceding vowel, it ended up being spelt as a U, so that Omicron digamma tended to be heard as Omicron upsilon, O, O. And when digamma functioned as a vowel, as a consonant, and came before its vowels, in a word like woinos, it was heard as a consonant and pronounced w. So, digamma. 4 letters that look like what they aren't. This symbol encodes the sound n, h, w. N, h, w. And here are 5 other consonants that are just strange looking and frankly will take some getting used to. This one is like our Z. It's called zeta. Originally it was probably pronounced zd. Zd. We don't have many sounds in English, many words in English that have the zd sound in them. And in time, what happened to this sound in Greek is that it came to be pronounced the other way around. Z. Instead of zd, z. You can pronounce it either way. Early on it was pronounced zd, later on z. Zd or z. This one is an aspirated T sound. That is a T with air let out around it. So, t, t. Well, you might not be too surprised to find out that most English speakers get a bit lazy about this because we can't hear the difference between a t and a t very well. And so the tendency is to pronounce it th, the th, not the hard th as in that, but the soft th as in thin. So I personally pronounce it th. This symbol is the X. Remember that we had the he, which represented a kh, h sound, but this one really is the x or x sound, as in axe or example. This symbol, which looks kind of like an O with a line drawn down through it, is phi, not phi. This is xi, not xi. This is phi, not phi. Phi. And it's probably was originally pronounced again as is a P with air let out around it, like P. But for the same, by the same logic as we pronounce the theta as, most of us pronounce the theta as th instead of t, so also we pronounce the phi f instead of p. You might imagine that it would be a terrible thing for a modern scholar of Greek to mispronounce it in ways that would cause Plato or Aristotle to be offended and say, don't you even know how to speak the language? But the fact is, we learn the language to be able to read it, and you're not going to have to worry about native speakers of ancient Greek criticizing your pronunciation. That's one of the really wonderful things about them. Not that they're so nice, they're not, but they're dead. So, anyway, next one, ps, the PS sound. It looks like a U with a line drawn through it. It's a double consonant with a PS. You know it from words like psychology. You may not pronounce it that way, but that's what they would have said, something much more like ps. Okay, so you've got 5 odd-looking letters. If you were to sit down with a piece of paper and start drawing these things and pronouncing them each time you wrote them down, z, th, x, f, ps, you could do that probably, I don't know, 1 every 3 or 4 seconds anyway. In a minute, you could have gone through these things, what, 12 times each or so? You'd know them awfully quick. You'll want to get to work on these.